Yeah, here we go. Oh, this is a really good one. Hi everybody, my name is Megan Anderson and I'm a field agronomist with Iowa State University Extension and Outreach. And today we are in the agronomy teaching greenhouse at Iowa State, and Bob has given a little bit of a primer to the importance of emergence patterns in identifying weeds. And so I'm going to talk about 4 of our earliest germinating broadleaf weeds that we might see in crop fields and how you would identify them in the field. So let's get started. The first weed that you are likely to see emerge in a crop field is going to be kochia. So this is our earliest germinator. In fact, we don't see it in most fields, but particularly like in northwest Iowa, we do see a little bit more kochia come up. It has very small cotyledons, right? Those are those first leaves that come out on the plant. They are pretty linear. And then subsequent leaves also look really similar, right? They're really long and skinny. It produces alternate leaves that are covered in a kind of a dense fuzz. And as those leaves get bigger, you'll be able to flip them over and actually see that it has 3 really prominent veins that are parallel down the underside of the leaves. But kochia is a pretty easy one to identify because it really doesn't look like very many of our other species. The second weed that we might see out in fields, this one's a lot more common across the whole state of Iowa, is going to be giant ragweed. And so giant ragweed has sort of a round or ovate shaped cotyledon, right? So these first leaves. And then subsequent leaves are going to be opposite, right? So 2 leaves coming across from the same node on the plant at the same place. So those 2 leaves, right, they're always going to be basically the same size. And emerging at the same place on the stem. And most leaves on giant ragweed are going to have typically 3 to 5 big lobes on them. But sometimes they don't have lobes, or sometimes they're a little bit unevenly shaped. One of the other keys is that giant ragweed is really just rough feeling, so it's got a lot of hair on it. So we always want to look for what type of hair or pubescence plants have, where it's located, in some cases how it feels, right? Some plants are fuzzy and soft while other ones are really rough, and that hair, it just feels really stiff. And so giant ragweed does typically have a lot of hair on it, and it's a pretty rough leaf. Much bigger than basically any of our other weed species, any of these seedlings that we're going to look at. The next weed that we might see in the spring is going to be common lamb's quarter. As the name suggests, it is really common across the whole state of Iowa. And this is another one where it has these linear cotyledons that come off opposite on the stem, right? Those are those first leaves that the plant produces. And then subsequent leaves are going to be more of like a triangular shape or perhaps egg-shaped. Right, some people call them like a goosefoot because they'll have some very small dentations or perhaps very small lobes on the leaves. But one of the keys to identifying common lamb's quarter, totally different than basically any other weed we run into, is it has this kind of substance on the leaves that gives it a mealy appearance, especially on the young leaves and on the underside of leaves. And what you can see is you actually can just rub it right off those leaves. And so on the young plants especially, that can be a really cool key to identifying it. They look kind of sparkly in the sun, sort of pretty. And then the last of our early germinating species that I want to talk about is Pennsylvania smartweed. And so this is I would say a less common weed that we run into, similar to the kochia. We just don't see it as often in crop fields. But the smartweeds in general can be pretty easy to identify. Again, it has moderately sized, more of a linear shape cotyledon, perhaps a little lanceolate, a little wider in the middle and skinnier at the tip. And it's pretty nondescript, as these leaves are just kind of long and thin, right? Wider in the center. Occasionally, Pennsylvania smartweed will have like a watermark appearance to the leaf, so it'll have kind of a purple color or maybe even a grayish mark on the tops of the leaves. But one of the keys to all the smartweeds is that they have what's called an ochrea. So it basically has a small, sort of like a sheath that wraps around the stem at the base of each leaf. And so when you look at the stem of the Pennsylvania smartweed, even on the seedlings, you can see this little ochrea that wraps around the stem at the top of each of those petioles. So those are 4 early germinating species that we see in crop fields. We'll talk about some of the ones that germinate a little bit later in future videos, but these are the first ones we're going to see this spring, so get out and look for them. Check, 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 check. Hello? Okay. Let's do this. Kosher. Giant ragweed.